All right, I think we'll go ahead and start once I find my notes. Good evening, welcome, and thank you all for joining our second Pushing Perspectives panel discussion. I'm Catherine Malashevsky, and I'm a board member with Preservation Alumni. Today's panel will be about an hour and a half long. Our panelists will give brief presentations to provide background on themselves and on today's topic, and we will provide ample time at the end of their presentations for the panelist discussion. Please note this event will be recorded and available on PA's YouTube channel. Also, my internet is coming in and out, so Casey or Neela or Shanae might jump in if I kind of disappear. So before we get started, I wanted to give a quick introduction to our organization and to this event. But first, if you want your own hands-on experience at Greenwood Cemetery, come join us on June 5th for our PA Spring Workday. Space is limited, and we'll add a link to the chat shortly. Preservation Alumni, or PA, is a nonprofit organization established in 1877, whose membership consists primarily of alumni of Columbia University's Masters in Historic Preservation program. Since its inception, PA has worked to support and enrich the historic preservation program at Columbia by advising and assisting students, faculty, and alumni of the program. PA also seeks to advance preservation as a diverse field of public and professional endeavors. It is because of the very makeup of our membership that today's topic was selected. We all know the path to preservation through a college education, but how much do we understand about the careers and training for those who entered preservation through hands-on trade training? Our goal is to provide a platform for those with hands-on training and to those who provide this type of training to discuss their experiences and to spotlight the challenges they face in our field. Though there are many types of hands-on training programs for trades and craftspeople in preservation, today's focus is on paid training programs. As we will discuss later, this difference between paying for training or an education, as the case was for many of our members, versus being paid for your training allows for opportunities for far more people and addresses head-on the issues of inequality. In addition to providing a spotlight on the careers of tradespeople in our field today, your panelists may even challenge you to redefine how one acknowledges tradespeople or defines a preservationist. For example, just imagine if New York began landmarking buildings because of what tradesperson or unions had constructed them, rather than by who designed them or which wealthy person paid for them. So with that little teaser, I'd like to introduce our first panelist. So today's first panelist is Neela Wickremesignhe, known to many of us as a national treasure. Neela is currently the Robert A. and Elizabeth Rohn Jeffe Director of Restoration and Preservation at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, where she leads a masonry restoration program, as well as a summer internship program for local high schoolers. Neela holds a BA in Architecture and Urbanism from Smith College and an MS in Preservation from Columbia, class of 2011. Before her time at Greenwood, Neela worked as a conservation foreman and technician at Evergreen Architectural Arts in New York. So with that, Neela, take it away.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kat. And thank you, Casey and Shanae, for my fellow panelists. It's really wonderful to be able to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion within preservation, within the trades, and within capital P preservation. So I'm gonna share some slides with you all, look at my own notes, and talk about how I got into preservation, how I made that more, that turn a little closer and more acutely towards the trades, and how I go about teaching the preservation trades to young adults and indoctrinating youth to get involved in the preservation movement. So bear with me as I share my screen. I tried to find those glasses, but I couldn't. So like Kat said, I had started at Greenwood in 2016. And before that, I was a conservation foreman and technician at Evergreen Architectural Arts, and also had different other jobs in preservation before I got to Greenwood. So I do a lot of different things in my job, and to back up about how I got in this specific position, as you can see, I'm in a lot of different positions in my job, and it isn't the most direct path, and in some ways it is. So like Kat said, I have an undergraduate degree in architecture and urbanism from Smith College. And it was in college where I learned about the words historic preservation. I had always known about the importance of historic buildings. It's why I became interested in architecture. But growing up in New York City, growing up in a place where I knew very acutely that buildings were not forever. It wasn't the case in the neighborhood that I grew up in. It wasn't the case in different neighborhoods that I went to school in. So I really wanted to figure out how to become an advocate for historic places. And the kind of historic places that I was interested in weren't necessarily the capital H history that are usually individual landmarks as we know them, but the smaller, maybe more residential buildings and monuments that are scattered throughout most urban centers. But even with that interest in historic preservation as a teenager and then going into college, for me, I said, okay, I'm a person who wants to pursue academia, pursue a college education. So if I want to get interested in this field, I have to be an architect. That must be the way forward. So I was an architecture student. And in engaging with that path, you're really thrown into the design field, right? And that is a really rigorous and wonderful way to get interested in buildings, right? You understand what it takes to design buildings, what it takes to draw them, what it takes to become fluid and fluent in how to express yourself with a pencil and a computer. And you begin to be able to talk about buildings, to talk about spaces. So I went through I had a lot of studio experience in my undergrad. And through that experience, I also figured out what I didn't like. I didn't like that architects didn't really touch buildings. They touched paper, touched computer. It was a lot of ideas that may or may not get built, ideas that had a lot of other folks had to weigh in on it, very client driven, as we all know. But then when the curtain got pulled back a little bit about historic preservation, when I was ending my college career, and was this idea of what next. So when I found out about the preservation program at Columbia, I was like, yes, this is it. I'm going to move forward this way. But even then, in a conservation studio, I thought that my role would be more as advocate, in an advocacy role, rather than as a
Oh, we're good.
Okay, great. Awesome. And Kat is back. Great. So I talked myself onto that evergreen job site. I found out that it was a New York firm. I figured out who was the foreman there. I sent a lot of inappropriate emails because I didn't have the experience to know what I was doing. But thankfully, they just needed hands there, and I was able to talk my way into working at my desk job 2 days a week, and on site for a different company 3 days a week. And I started doing the doing part of restoration and conservation, which is, washing walls and doing your OSHA scaffolding training, and starting to do things on a job site, like sweep the floor and make sure everyone has what they need. And that was an important part for me to figure out my personal role in restoration and in preservation. And then through a lot of different other avenues, I was Greenwood. Basically, I worked at Evergreen for a number of years. After I also worked for other conservation firms in New York, which really gave me a lot of experience. The site experience is really important. And I found out that Greenwood was, starting to create a real restoration department and was looking for someone to lead that. And I applied, and here I am. What I didn't really know was that they were also in the works of creating a training program for young adults ages 18 to 27 based in the cemetery to teach hands-on restoration trades in masonry to folks that wanted to get into the business. And I joined in 2016. We had our first class in 2017. And it was a real kind of whirlwind into how to properly expose the restoration trades to young adults who have no idea what they're about. So I was able to do that. This is a photo of my first class in 2017. We started with 10. I graduated 7. That means, you know, we try our best to catch a big group and see who hangs on. So this is my crowd from 2017. And we were able to jump on a really large project right away. What I try to do during my training programs is create a job site that is as real as it can be. We have scaffolding, we're doing real work, obviously. We're working at heights, we're working on roofs, etc. So I completely admit I bit off more than I could chew with this first project. It eventually got done. But it was my hope to try to make a job site as real as I could, because I was once that person on a job site where I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea everything else that was going on around me. So I had to make sure that my students understood what they were getting into. Working on a roof, what happens when people don't wear their hard hats, right? So it was very important for me to try to emulate that. We had, like I said, 10 students to start. We were cutting out and pointing as you do. And myself doing some pin installation with a union teacher. This is Eddie Ramirez from Local 1. And that was the big part of this program. So not only is it a paid program for young adults, but it's also an opportunity for them to get information from a conservator, an architectural historian, et cetera, in the field, and also a union representative, a craftsman who's worked in the field, who has taken lots of trainings in the field and had a lifetime of experience, so that they can speak to not only what it means to start in this field, but also what it means to do preservation work as a construction worker. This was my 2018 class. There's Shanae in my picture as well. And we were able to continue our success of the first project onto another mausoleum. So we had a bigger class. I started out with 12, graduated 10, getting better every year. And my favorite, or I mean, the best part of this class for me is that we had 5 women and 5 men. And we were able to sort of I wanted to create the kind of job site that I wanted to see outside. So it was a wonderful experience, not just for my students, I hope, but also for me to be able to say, like, this was the most gender balanced job site I've ever been on, and I'm the teacher. So we were able to do some really beautiful work in the Bryce Mausoleum. Of course, cutting out old repairs, cutting out bad repairs, and doing a lot of repointing is the main crux of our work. And we're also able to experience what it is to work at a historic cemetery, which is a different kind of job site. So we were able to sort of see the seasons change, see the sun come out, and see the to be able to, yes, thank you, robot lady. It's important to be able to show young adults getting into this field that this is dynamic field. It has a lot of different players, designers, architects, and so forth. And when all the different backgrounds that we have, we can make a really beautiful product at the end.
Right,
Casey,
sorry,
do you want to go next?
I've been coming in and out, so I wasn't sure if we were ready for
That's
number
okay.
2. All right,
Are we
great.
good? I'm ready. You're ready. Okay.
All right, so our second panelist is Casey Weisdock. Casey has a Master's of Science in Conservation from the University of Pennsylvania's Historic Preservation Graduate Program. She now acts as Director of Industry Development and Technical Services for the International Masonry Institute, or IMI. Casey is an architectural conservator by training with experience in both design and contracting capacities. Casey is responsible for assisting the design and construction community on masonry projects and technical inquiries. She has developed and presented continuing education seminars and hands-on training for architects, engineers, and contractors nationally. Casey in part develops and leads the Historic Masonry Preservation Certificate training offered through IMTEF. Casey is also the chapter president of the Association for Preservation Technology, Delaware Valley chapter. All right, Casey, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. Do I sound all right to everybody? Good. Okay, great. I had to take my headphones off. They were killing me. Okay, so yeah, thank you to Kat for inviting me onto this panel and Neela for really pulling me in. And it's great to be here with Shanae. So really excited to have this discussion tonight. And I'm going to try to introduce the audience to 3 different organizations in about 5 minutes. So I'm not going to really talk about myself, but I will say that I also had sort of, I found my way to this position specifically, but historic preservation and conservation non-traditionally, which I think is pretty typical, especially for those who are working in the field. And I actually have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. And that's what drew me into actually working as a conservation technician. And when I was doing that, before I decided to actually put a ring on it and go to grad school, I was working amongst a lot of trained artists who are actually carrying out a lot of this conservation work in the field. And I think that that's really interesting because that's sort of a weird parallel to what's happening in the trades, and that it's groups of people who are creative, who have the hand skills, who have the drive to be interactive with materials, are pursuing this career, but through totally different ways. And I think that it's really just a lack of understanding of the ways in which this work can be carried out and who is qualified to do it. And obviously that also is an interesting conversation in regard to capital P preservation when we start thinking about, those of us who then either go further or just start off from the beginning in pursuing it through academia, and how some of us end up in the field and some of us don't, and how we all kind of end up meeting together at the end. So that's just a tiny bit about me. Today, I am the Director of Industry Development and Technical Services for IMI in the Philadelphia area. I cover Central Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and Delaware. But I also operate and consult on restoration projects nationally. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what IMI does, how we interact with the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, and how members of the BAC are preservationists and carry out preservation work every day, and how they are trained through the International Masonry Training Education Foundation. So that's 3 organizations right there. I hope that you can all stay with me. So to put it as simply as possible, at IMI, what we do is we offer training and education for designers, engineers, construction professionals, and we also simultaneously offer all of the training and education for the members of the Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers Union. So we do all of the apprenticeship and journey worker upgrade training. That's that we design the curriculum and we offer the curriculum at our national training center, but also at training centers all over the United States. And so for me, I kind of do both. I offer assistance to designers, but I also offer this upgrade training or participate and teach this upgrade training, the Historic Masonry Preservation Certificate training. So just briefly, under that umbrella, what IMI does when we're assisting sort of designers, we're doing things like plan and spec review, detailing assistance, job site troubleshooting, continuing education. I often do continuing education on restoration and preservation topics. And when it's not a pandemic, we do hands-on material workshops for people who are specifying work, who want to get their hands dirty and have never really interacted with materials, which I think is really important. We also do a lot in terms of new technology and research. We're often, myself and my colleagues at IMI are working on code and standard development. I work a lot on restoration best practices and standard development in the industry. Some other types of technology like BIM for masonry. We focus on energy and sustainability, of course. Resiliency is a big topic these days. So we cover not only obviously restoration topics, but a lot of new construction topics as well. And we do a lot of research on new products and products that are being used in the industry. My light just went out. There we go. Okay. We also connect people to qualified union contractors because, again, we are directly supporting members of the BAC. And so we interact with the signatory contractors that employ those members and make sure that they are doing everything they need to do. At the BAC, the Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers Union, under that umbrella, we cover a variety of what we call trowel trades. This is brick and block, stone, PCC, which is pointers, cleaners, caulkers. It's a very antiquated term that is essentially our restoration masons. Tile, marble, terrazzo masons, rain screen refractory, some concrete and plaster. So anybody who does this work can be a part of the BAC. And these are the trainings we create for these types of trowel trades. So the apprenticeship, we have the apprenticeship training, but we also do a bunch of pre-apprenticeship training. IMI and IMTEF offers pre-job training, which is essentially a 2-month training for people who have no experience whatsoever. Like they've never picked up a hammer in their life. So they come and they do this training to prepare to then go into the apprenticeship and to feel sort of much more secure and really joining a job site. We also hold the contract for basically the masonry training through all of Job Corps. So our instructors teach the masonry curriculum in the Job Corps training centers that have a masonry curriculum. And then we're associated with a variety of national and local workforce development programs, and the Greenwood Cemetery program, as well as the Woodlawn Cemetery program, the overarching Bridge to Crafts Careers program are one that we obviously support and provide instructors for as well to co-teach with Neela. And our apprenticeship training is offered at 60 training centers nationwide. That includes our national training center right outside of Washington, D.C., but also at local training centers all across the United States. And the training centers are typically affiliated with a local union. So like here in Philadelphia, our local union is up in Northeast Philadelphia, and on that same campus is our training center. And in the training centers, we offer standardized curriculum of training. And it's taught by certified instructors that we train prior to them teaching the members. Apprenticeship, if one is accepted into the apprenticeship, they have to train for about 6,500 hours before they graduate to become a journey worker. And during that time, they're working on a job site with a contractor and coming to class, typically on weeknights and Saturdays. And that usually takes about 4 years for them to complete their hours. And then after that, they can do continuing education. It's basically just like upgrade training, it's these different types of trainings that we offer, and the Historic Masonry Preservation Certificate Program is one of them. So if they want to learn more, they can continue to do so. And I know that one of the questions that I got from Kat was, how many people do we typically accept? Well, the acceptance into the apprenticeship is 100% based on the economy and how much work is needed, what the labor need is. If the economy is not doing so hot and the labor need is low, then we can't take on as many people because we don't want to take on people and then have no work for them. So it kind of fluctuates is the answer. And then, like I said, we do have this upgrade training that people can pursue if they're interested. And I'm going to just cover a little bit of the Historic Masonry Preservation Certificate Program because I think it's of interest to this audience. So I'm going to really quick. So this training is a certificate training. It meets the ASTM E2659 standard for certificate trainings, so it's official. And in this training, the biggest thing is that what I found teaching this training is that most of the members who come to take this training, they have the hand skills, they know the materials, they know how to do the repairs mostly. They don't know why they have to do it the way they do it. And so a big thing is that 2 days of this training, we sit in the classroom and we talk about the fundamentals of preservation. And we talk about the philosophy, the Secretary of Interior Standards. We talk about all of the reasons that influence why we treat historic buildings differently than other existing buildings. And then we also give them an introduction to architecture and building technology. We dive deep into materials and conditions of deterioration, HSRs, testing reports, et cetera, and mortar replication, of course. And then they go out on the training floor and they take that knowledge and put it into action, and they train on different, new materials, traditional trade methods of all different types of brick, terracotta, stone restoration, et cetera. We also usually bring in outside engineers or preservation architects to talk about case studies and then facilitate a conversation between the group. And part of the way that we have a lot of people who come to take this training because they're really deeply interested, but we've also created sample specification language that architects and engineers can drop into their spec, and then this actually requires the training so that you know that the people who are carrying out the work have this level of understanding and hopefully raise the level of workmanship on the project. So hopefully I covered it all, but we can discuss more as we go. So on to Shanae. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Casey. So our third panelist tonight is Shanae Kemp. Shanae was born and raised in Brooklyn and is breaking barriers, proving that there's nothing a woman can't accomplish. Shanae has been a devoted member of the hospitality industry for 3 years, swiftly rising from an intern to a hotel engineer supervisor and facilities manager at New Hotel Brooklyn. She is a proud graduate of Non-Traditional Employment for Women, or NEW, where she has trained in carpentry, electrics, painting, and strength training fitness. Additionally, she completed the historic masonry program provided by Neela at Greenwood Cemetery. In her spare time, Shanae is a photographer with a focus on landscape photography. Currently, she is in the process of joining Local 28, the Sheet Metals Union, where she will focus on architectural design. Go ahead, Shanae.
Great. That was awesome. Hello, as you know, my name is Shanae, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got into preservation. So I've originally heard about the restoration program through my younger sister, which she graduated from Green City Forest. So once you graduate, they send you newsletters and stuff about different opportunities. So she said, oh yeah, this would be something great that I think you'd be interested in. So I said, okay, let me try something new, because like you said, I've been working in the hotel field for a pretty long time. So I'm like, okay, let me see what construction is really all about. So getting there, it was a humbling experience. Hold on, let me share my screen. Can you see anything, guys? No? Can you?
Not yet.
Not yet? Hold on. I'm like, you guys can't see anything? How come I'm the only person that has this issue?
Did you click the green button?
Can you? Yeah, press the green button.
And then you choose your...
Boom. Okay. So like Neela said, I was able to be in this cohort with her, and we got to learn a lot of different things. So like tuck pointing, stone cleaning, yarn installation. She taught us how to use our masonry tools. Just a lot of hands-on things about construction. Wearing the proper boots, being prepared no matter what the weather is, making sure that you have gloves because the weather could change at any moment. And by me being in such a good cohort, it made me realize that construction is way more than just being a laborer or being a flagger, that you could see yourself in the future doing something like historical. You could be the person helping build the new Trinity Church or something like that, you know? And being a part of history is just an amazing thing. So it made me think like, okay, maybe working at a hotel is maybe not something I was meant to do. Maybe I was born to be outside and and seeing where that took me. And even though I didn't decide to go into that route and decided to go through sheet metal, it opened my mind to new possibilities. And I think that's what I want you guys to get out of it. I want you guys to think broader about preservation and your opportunities. So this is not going to be anything bashing about college or anything. This is hands-on knowledge. Hands-on knowledge. And I think that is very important, especially for high school kids, to get that type of knowledge before you decide to go to college. Because who's to say that that's really the route for you? And I think that by doing the training with Neela, I think that you will be able to decide, okay, maybe reading about it and actually being in the field and actually doing it is completely different. It's completely different. You get a different type of joy out of working with your teammates and learning something new. Like before this, I didn't know anything about mortar or different building patterns and the difference between limestone and marble and different brick patterns and why they build it the way that they do. But I didn't learn that until I went into the program. So even when we had bad weather, like it was raining or anything, she always took the opportunity to teach us something. So when it was raining, we did yarn installation, we did caulking, learning, practicing exterior caulking. We learned about landscaping, and these tools will help you in the long run. So as you can see, this is my partner. This was my partner at the time. Like she's super handy. She's actually in the union now. So I'm so proud of Jocelyn. She always knew that that's something that she wanted to do. Very handy. Um, so as you can see, we're mixing the mortar. So at that time, you also have to realize that the weather determines how much water or how much mix you're going to actually use. Because if it's cold outside, then you might not need as much water. But when it gets hot, like it gets it closes up real quick. So you got to be real quick, you know. But the thing that I loved about this program is that it didn't matter if you didn't have any experience. They didn't really want people that had a whole bunch of experience. It was all about learning and being able to work in a group. You know, you just had to be presentable and be respectful and want to learn. They'll train you. You'll learn the things. They're not expecting you to learn everything in 5 weeks and be a pro. This is just something to open the gate. So everything was just a learning experience. No one in the program knew anything. And by the end, everybody decided to go the restoration route. Everyone, even whether they decided not to go into the union and decided to go non-union, they still went that route and they're still there. So the program must be doing something right. To be able to be so young, I think the youngest person that was in the program was what, 17, 18. And for us to be able to work on the Egyptian mausoleum, when do you ever get an experience like that, to work in an Egyptian mausoleum? And as soon as you walk in it, it's like, it's so awesome, like so awesome. And especially if you're afraid of heights, but you want to go the construction route, this is perfect. Because trust me, I was one of those people that was afraid of heights. But best believe after getting on the scaffold every day and building that confidence and being on the top of the roof and everything and being in different positions, you learn that you're going to be all right. It's not as bad. It's not as bad as it looks. But I've seen and worked on bigger buildings, but this is definitely something to get your feet wet. So hold on. Let me go to the next slide. So as you can see, the landscaping, we got to, trust me, it did not look like that in the beginning. It did not look like that. It was really scary. The trees were all the way up to the ceiling. Like, it looked really scary, but thanks to Neela and her team, she was able to get things situated perfectly for safety reasons, and we were able to learn in a safe environment. Hold on. So this is me tuck pointing. As you can see, this huge gap right here. So like I was saying, it's all about how you position your body. So that's something that you learn later down the line. It takes a little practice and a little finesse, but definitely something that's definitely doable. These are one of the things that you will learn in the program, because it doesn't matter like what type of construction you're always going to have to position your body in difficult positions. It's no situation where it's just going to be perfect all the time, and you have to be willing to adapt to that environment. See, as you can see, my neck is all the way to the side. But when you get to see your work in the end and know that you were the one that put all that hard work into it and it looks perfect, there's nothing more perfect than when you get the perfect line. Oh, I know Neela, she can attest to this. There's nothing better than the perfect amount of mortar, and the line is just clean. It's just clean, like the perfect amount of water, the perfect amount. It just clean through in and throughout. So, like I was saying, the caulking, and it was raining the whole day. It was raining the whole day, but we were still learning. And I think that was very important for us, especially being so young. She didn't want us to think that, oh, just because it's raining, that there are going to be any shortcuts, that this is just going to be a day where you get to just relax and chill. No, you're going to be learning. Even if you're not in the field, you're going to learn something that later on you'll be thankful that you had that knowledge. You'll know how to caulk at the end, even though it might not be the prettiest, but you would have practiced enough to make it look at least decent. So as you can see, I was working at the top, and at this point I was still nervous. So I was a little shaky. These are one of, as you can see, these are one of the pointing tools. The pointing tools, they vary in sizes depending on how big the gap is. So me and my partner Jocelyn at the time, this whole section was empty. Can you see my cursor or no? Okay. This whole section was empty, just like at the bottom, empty. It's like a big gap of air, and it's your job to fill that section. So me and her, we had to fill it as best as possible, make it look as neat as possible. So as you can see, look at that, perfect. It looks perfect. So yeah, so when you go from not knowing anything to actually having the knowledge to even accomplish something like this, you get happy over the little accomplishments, you know. So just imagine when you're actually working on something bigger, you're going to feel, it's going to be a big sense of pride to have that type of courage, type of knowledge that she'll have the opportunity to learn with Neela, because Neela, she knows her stuff, and she'll make you take it out and do it all over again. Take it out and do it all over again. It doesn't matter how long it takes for it to look perfect. She's going to keep having you do it over and over and over again until you get it right. Because by the time you've done it that 10th time, the next time she won't have to come behind you and be like, okay, you got it the next time. The next joint is going to look perfect. It's going to look perfect every single time. And then you're going to have days where you're not doing well. And she's going to be like, okay, do it again. But that was the best part, is the humbling and learning experience. But I'm going to let Catherine speak, because I know this has been way more than 5 minutes.
No, that was great. Thank you so much, Shanae. So I do have questions for the panelists. If you have your own questions, please put them in the Q&A. Some of them are coming in. So I know that the panelists have a lot that they also want to continue to say about the topic. So we'll let them sort of have the spotlight. And then if there's time, we'll go into audience questions. But one thing we wanted to do to break the ice with everybody is to do some quick polls. So I'm going to launch a poll now. Please respond. And it's basically yes, no questions. And then your answers will be broadcasted live. So I'm going to put the panelists on here too. Does everybody see the poll that just popped up? We'll give everyone about 20 seconds. See the numbers coming in.
About how many participants do you have, Kat?
We have 36 with us.
Excellent.
So
I want to see what our sample looks like.
all right, I think everyone who wanted to answer did. I'm going to end that one. So that's the answer to our first questions. Have you done any hands-on training? And I think that's actually, that was surprising to me. I didn't think we'd have so many. So a majority, 70, Sinead's like, yeah, we do. So 73%. So that's pretty good. So now let's do, I'm going to do the second poll. Oops, I'm sorry, that's the same question. Let's see if I can figure out how to do the second question. Okay, so we've just launched our second question. Do you have a family member that is a tradesperson? All right. I think we have the same number of respondents. And there is our result. So I know that's one thing the panelists want to address as well, is how do you get into trade careers specifically? And the assumption was generally that you've had a family member or you know somebody who's been in it. So it's very much sort of a legacy sort of trade. So we were going to do an open question to the audience, but I think I want to start with questions for the panelists instead. So I want to start with Shanae. First, two-part question. First is, could you tell us what sort of happened? I'm sorry, audio. Can you tell us what happened with your career after your training with Neela, what that trajectory looked like? And the second part of it is, because you're the one that works in the field sort of the most along with Neela, what do you wish for people on the other side, meaning the architects, the designers, the superintendents, and the foremans, to know about what you do?
I'm sorry, can you say that question one more time? 'Cause
Sure. So the first part is, can you tell us about your career after your training with Neela? And then the second part of the question is, from working in the field, what do you want people on the other side, the architects, designers, engineers, superintendents, to know about what you do?
okay. After the training program, Neela, she contacted me with a bunch of like, of course, the union, obviously, and some non-union opportunities as well. So I decided to go the non-union route in the beginning, just get my feet wet. So I got to work on some landmarks in the city, and I got the opportunity to do stone cleaning with ICC. So that was pretty interesting. I got to do some tuck pointing. I got to work with some power tools and stuff. So and even after that, I was able to get joined non-traditional employment for women. So to get some more skills in carpentry and stuff like that, because I wanted to see, like I knew that I wanted to go the construction route, but I wanted to know for sure what exactly do you want to do? I know that there's plumbers, there's electricians, there's steam fitters, there's so many opportunities. And if you're gonna invest years into something, you better be sure that you better be sure that this is something that you really wanted to do. And non-traditional employment for women, it gave me that opportunity to learn, which is what I wanted to do. So after graduating non-traditional employment, I decided to go with Local 28 sheet metal. So right now I'm actually in the process of getting into the union. So it's a whole big process. It's not just you take the exam and you get in. No, it's a pre-apprenticeship program, constant exams, projects, drafting, the whole nine. So I'm happy with my decision though. So Local 28. And something that I would like the architects to know, that just because like it might look good on the blueprint does not mean that it's really going to look like that when you're actually out in the field. Because with me working with enclosures, it's sometimes it's a little different because the floor might not be leveled, or the way that the building is angled, or the wall might be completely different from the other side of the wall. So just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean when you get in the field, it's going to be that it's going to be clean cut like that. Sometimes you have to make adjustments to make it fit. So with enclosures, everything has to be spot on, like as far as level and plumbing and stuff like that, because it has to look perfect. When you look at, for some people that don't know what enclosures are, they are covers for like radiators. You might walk past them and you wouldn't even recognize what they are, but they're in buildings, they're in schools and stuff like that, but they're usually painted. But when we get them, they're not painted, they're just metal, and you have to make them look perfect even though the blueprint is completely different from what it is in real life.
And how does that impact what you do? So when you get a drawing set that doesn't conform to what's there on site, what's your process in dealing with that?
Um, Sometimes what we'll do is that we'll have like different angles and we'll set it up for like a different height, or we'll just have to put something behind it or under it to make it leveled. Or sometimes we'll just have to just go to a whole different side and lift it up to make it look leveled, you know, or make it look like there's nothing wrong with it. So it's just all about adapting. And if I can't fix it, I'll just call my foreman and he'll just do some notching and stuff like that.
Thanks, Shanae. So for our next question, this one's for Casey and Neela. Both of the institutions that you guys work with provide training programs. Could you give us a little bit of an insight on why they decided to do training? I think for you, Casey, I think that it makes kind of more sense. It's a professional organization. I want you to touch on that definitely. And also Neela, why would a cemetery want to start offering training programs?
Neela, you can start.
Cool. Okay. We get that question a lot, but I think if you called us something else, if you called us an outdoor sculpture museum, then it would make it very clear why we would want to have a training program for stone, right? So I think all you have to do is come to Greenwood one time and you'll know exactly why. Because we are, of course, a historic cemetery. We are, I mean, every day we have services. This past year has been the toughest year to work on a historic cemetery, working on the grounds during an international pandemic where we see services every day is hard. But the monuments and sculptures and mausoleums that we have are for everyone to be able to visit and be able to see how beautiful they are. And we really are, I think, one of the most perfect definitions of a cultural landscape. We're a place where you can really be in the landscape, see art, see beautiful trees, and it all comes together. So as a historic cemetery, we are constantly looking backwards, but we're always looking forward. So in creating the training program, we're answering a need to allow for a more diverse population to understand what it is and what is needed to get into the construction field. And with our partners in IMI and also the World Monuments Fund is a significant backer of this program, because we want to have more preservationists in the world. We want to have more craftspeople in the world, and to have more of them in the 5 boroughs is really important to make sure that every single preservation project has skilled craftspeople to work in them. But also in a small level, for me, it's getting 10 more people who can call themselves preservationists every year, even if they go into sheet metal or become a tattoo artist. Shanae, I think that's what Zion is doing right now. But this is creative, right? And it's, if I can catch one person who now, if in their neighborhood, someone passes around a petition and says, what do you think about this? And they say, I know exactly what I think about this because of an experience I had during an internship, during a job training program where I was paid to learn more about something. And so I think for Greenwood, we want to be a good community member. We want to offer an opportunity for not just people who have the time to come into Greenwood as a visitor, but also maybe live right next door and have never been inside, because we want to be really welcoming to our community and the folks that will count themselves as part of the preservation movement way past, me or you.
Cool. Yeah, also an interesting, just from the perspective of capital P preservation, I feel like cemeteries are really great training grounds because mausoleums are essentially small, they're small buildings that have walls and a roof structure and a foundation, and on a not very small, on like a smaller scale, can really teach a lot about building technology and construction, as well as conservation of those materials. So it's like a funny, little mock-up of a building that is 100 years old, you know what I mean? But also just, with what you're saying, Neela, just really allowing the people in the neighborhood to become preservationists and to see the value of their surroundings and find out histories that appeal to them. It may not be the capital H history that's peddled through the historic site, but might be ways that they can connect with it otherwise. But so the apprenticeship program, I'm not going to talk too much about that in terms of creating an apprenticeship program through the BAC, because it's a little obvious. It's like you have an audience that can benefit from a training model, and we've gotten away from sort of the medieval guilds where you have a master mason who's training an apprentice or two. Not that it's super different, but just a more efficient model today. But I think focusing on the Historic Masonry Preservation Certificate program that I'm a part of is a little bit more applicable to this audience and is interesting because, again, kind of getting back to what I was saying initially, there's sort of these parallel ways into the industry that are kind of operating next to one another and sometimes crossover, but oftentimes stay pretty parallel. And that's the world of conservation, the world of architectural conservation through the perspective of a conservator or a conservation technician. And then there's the preservation trades, where we have tradespeople who have gone through an apprenticeship program in the BAC. They're working on these existing and historic buildings. They have the foundation of hand skills and the knowledge of the materials, of deterioration, of basic repairs, basic maintenance. And this training is basically filling a gap to help them take it to the next level and understand the greater level of delicacy that a historic building needs or necessitates. And just giving them, again, that knowledge that goes along with why do we do it the way we do it? Why do we do it differently? Why do we have to be careful? Why do we have to be mindful of original materials, original mortar, and taking care of these materials in a very specific way? Because again, most of the people know how to do the repairs. They may not know how to do the high level conservation treatments, and it still may not be appropriate for them to do it. That's why we call the conservator. But there's a great in-between that I think a lot of the preservation and PCC craft workers do know how to do and do have the background to do. And this training really filled a gap in terms of just preservation philosophy and knowledge, as well as some of those higher level treatments that perhaps they are doing it, maybe they don't entirely understand how to do it, or they haven't reached that echelon. And I think that it's been really interesting because a lot of the people that I get in my class, they're like hungry for the information and they're stoked because they also really care about these buildings and find them really interesting and really neat. And I'll start off a class and people will walk in and they're always like a little skeptical because, again, I come from a different world than what they're in, and I come from academia. And so it's like, who's this person coming in to tell me how it is? But then by the end of the class, they're like pulling up photos on their phone and showing me all of these really cool projects that they've worked on, that they've learned about, that they now have a greater understanding. And so that training was created about 8 years ago, and we've had about 700 graduates through the program. That's nationally, and we're doing more and more every year. And I just think that it's a great opportunity and sort of it's a topic that I think needs to continue to be explored, and basically a way for us to close that gap between sort of preservation programming through academia and through the trades, and have them cross more often and perhaps learn from one another and facilitate more support for one another. Because obviously conservators do have work that only they should be doing. And tradespeople have work that honestly, and to some degree, only they should be doing because they have this greater understanding of the material to a certain degree. And how those two factions can work together, support each other, and perhaps work on the same work.
So to kind of continue to talk a little bit about then training in the path afterwards, there's a little bit of an elephant in the room about union versus non-union. So could all three of you sort of talk a little bit about that difference? And I know we have to just be mindful of what we're saying, but from your experience and why it sounds like the training programs do try to focus on going towards union.
Neela, you want to go first, or can I go first?
Go ahead, Shanae.
With union, I can say that the safety precautions are higher, the standards are higher, because that's the main thing that separates the union from non-union, is the safety precautions and the tools. safer and better tools. In my experience, I've worked union jobs and I've worked non-union jobs. So working with Neela, we had the privilege of working with good tools. Now, when I was working at a lot of non-union sites, it wasn't too many places that had good tools, or they were really old, or like they were really, like, you could tell that they were there for like 20, 30 years, like, no lie. But with the union, it's like they're always pushing the agenda for technology and some real advanced stuff. So that's what I know.
And I'll piggyback off that. I can speak to my own experience of being a conservation technician, being young out of school, and that's my job, is not my non-Greenwood job, not as a teacher or as a conservator, but as a technician, and saying, and doing the work that was deemed only for a conservation technician, not for the union trades that are at on the site. And I think the other elephant in the room is that, there's no conservators union, right? I often ask my students, what's that about? And the answer is that there aren't enough of us, right? If there was enough of us, we would have the critical mass that the bricklayers have or the plumbers have, and we'd be able to do something about it. But we can also speak that, we're all women in this webinar, which I think is wonderful. I think Kat and I were in the same class. We're mostly women in our class. And that wasn't strange for me, and it wasn't strange for any of us, but I think it was strange for maybe some of the men in our class. And I've been on many job sites where people will assume that the only woman on site is the conservator, because we do like very tiny things with our very tiny hands. But there's also this idea that as a young person coming out of a graduate program, like you can take what you get, and if you can get on a really great job site, like awesome. And that's the extra learning you need to move forward within your craft, which is being a conservator and getting your feet wet in that way. But it is a non-union route, even though we're talking about union, non-union for the trades. If you were to look at conservation as one of the trades, we have work to do. And I'll say that it's in a good way, because when I tell my students, or I let them know about different options of employment after graduation or further knowledge, when the union, any union trade, sets a very high bar so that non-union can rise to it. And that's been my experience in New York, that we have a strong history of trades in New York City, and that allows for non-union companies to also have very high safety standards, to also continue to raise their hourly wages, to also make sure that their workers have the appropriate safety certifications. So I think for myself as a technician and as a young person in the field, we conservators have a lot to learn from the unions, how to speak up for ourselves, how to make sure that we're getting fair wages. We're supposedly this, very well-trained, sort of taught group, but we have, of course, always more to learn. And I think that as a professional in now continuing on, being immersed in the union trades while still being in management or being in charge of people, is that I think that it's really important to see how we can both learn from each other. What do I leave at work, and what do I bring home? But I think for my students, I often say, shoot for a career. And that might be with a non-union company that has a really good track record, that is again and again chosen by landmarks to do really great work, that retains their employees, or a union route. Some folks, like Shanae said, if you really want to go that way, you really have to be sure. Some folks aren't ready for that kind of commitment. So I often find myself as a teacher recommending a non-union route to see if they really like it, or to make sure that someone can get financially set up to do some of the unpaid trainings that happen in a pre-job program for a union. So I think just disseminating enough information to a young adult that is ready to make a decision is important, because I don't want to set someone up on a path that they can't fully go down.
Yeah, you both covered like all of it. But I will say that for those of us, the folks in the audience who are on the, obviously the other side of the project team, who may be discussing with an owner whether to choose union or non-union, I mean, there's a place for both, and there's a benefit to having non-union outfits. From a standpoint of preservation trades and training, like you're saying, Neela, it's great to have that option for people who aren't ready to make that life's commitment, because that really is what applying for and getting into a union apprenticeship is that it's a career commitment, and they really want people who are very serious and very sure that they're ready to make that their life and to continue on through 4 years of essentially schooling and then continue on with that. So sometimes that's too much and people aren't ready, and they just need some more experience in the field to be able to make that decision strongly. But back to, for those people who are a part of a project team who might be discussing whether to choose a union or non-union contractor to carry out some type of restoration work. The thing about union, and in part it's because we have such a robust training program, is that when you pay for union labor, you're investing in the next generation of craft workers, because our training is training that next generation. And we need that to be able to carry on these types of skills and to, make sure that our knowledge is being carried down the line to take care of historic buildings. And again, there's a place for non-union work, and but there isn't sort of that longer term focus. And also I have to say, with obviously with union, it's more expensive because you're paying a living wage. Not only are you paying a living wage to the people who are carrying out the work, but you're basically ensuring a middle class living for people who do this work. So if you care about that for yourself, I always challenge people to say, well, care about it for your neighbor as well, because it's an opportunity for people who maybe didn't have the opportunity to go to college or just wasn't cut out for college, to be able to actually make a solid living and to be able to take care of their family and to give back to the community, as a member of that community. So
I think you guys all hit on a little bit this idea of stability. I am not in the industry like you guys are, just from the outside, but there seems to be the correlation of, once you have made it into the union, which is way more work than I had realized, is it's sort of equivalent to when we have our preservation degrees. You have something to fall back on and you can hop around to jobs easier. Again, I haven't worked for non-union. I don't know if that's necessarily the case elsewhere, but it seems like a level of additional security. We got one question from the panel that is asking how young is too young. So I would like, Neela, for you to talk a little bit about, in a good way, you should be starting younger was the question. I did not word that right.
Good.
But Neela, can you talk about your high school program?
Sure. People at Greenwood say, like, Neela, how are your kids? And I'm like, I hate children. So this is the project that I was talking about, where Shanae was my student. That's for adults 18 to 27. So I'll talk about that age range. That age range is important because you want to catch people as they're making decisions, right? Am I going to go here or there? Am I going to go to school, or am I going to go into a job? Also, to be very transparent, the donors or funders want to look at that age range, and they have identified that as the end date of young adult is 27. So I didn't know, but here I am. So also I do high school internship programs, which for me is much more challenging. I keep all of those actual kids on the ground. We don't do any work on scaffolding. So I would say that is too young for scaffolding, because we have to make sure that we have all the safety certifications as an adult for my adult program. So I'm not going to teach you how to do this kind of work if you can't pass an OSHA class. So again, that's something that's really important. But the high school students, we work on the ground. We work very slowly on manageable projects, usually stone resetting and cleaning. And also me as a conservator, I have to be like philosophically and emotionally ready for things to break. So we work on things that I hope will not break. So it's important to keep that in mind. So at Greenwood, that means we're working on small headstones that the work we're doing is usually lifting them out of the ground. I work with my team on, that's really monuments work and less mausoleum work. So I also kind of lay on a little bit more, what does it mean to be a preservationist? What does it mean to look at historic things? And I also do a lot of research. Greenwood has archives that are at our disposal. So I tend to fold that kind of more academic with a high school kind of academic, you know, how to do research, what a primary resource document is, how to look up someone on a census. So that's the work I do with younger students, and those students are 14 and 15. So that's the bottom end of the work that we do with young adults. But we partner with Williamsburg High School for Architecture and Design and Stephen Mather High School in Midtown, and both of those high schools have a preservation curriculum. So they have what I wished I had when I was in high school, which is they named the words historic preservation. So even getting to that step when you're a freshman in high school is huge. And in their curriculums, both schools ask their students to do summer internships. So that's, again, doing work on Governor's Island, Ellis Island, doing work within the park, the state park network within the city, getting to know what the National Trust is as a high schooler. It just, again, it's another way to pull the curtain across on a niche in and figure out like, how does someone become a park ranger? And then they tell them how, how does someone get to work for New York City Department of Parks? So those two high schools really have a great curriculum, and we've been doing some kind of high school internship program for probably the last 17 years.
So we got one question from the audience that was asking, where are these programs advertised? So with the high school program, it sounds like it's because you already have the direct connection. So you have kind of the feeder high school. But what about, Shanae, you mentioned that your sister had sent you the ad for Neela's training for young adults. And then Casey, can you also talk about where IMI does some of its advertising, and then a little bit about what the application process is?
So you want me to go first? Okay, so like I said, my sister, she graduated from a program called Green City Forest. So with a internship program like that, you get to decide what do you want to like major in, I guess. So my sister, she decided to take on farming. So when she graduated, since you're an alumni, they send you newsletters, just like non-traditional employment for women, like programs like that. I think they're called JATC or one of those type of programs. If you're in one of those programs, then what they'll do is they'll send you like a newsletter or something like that, and you'll be able to be like eligible for programs like that, or you can send that information to somebody that might be interested in it.
And I'll jump in also. I would be remiss if I did not mention Opportunities for a Better Tomorrow. There are a social services program arm that works directly with Greenwood, with me. I am not a social worker. I am not someone who is a professional at this, but the folks at OBT are. They've been in the adult workforce development business for about 30 years, and they are our neighborhood partner. They're right in Sunset Park. So because we have that neighborhood partner that's already been doing workforce development within spitting distance of Greenwood, we were able to partner with them. So they do a lot of our recruitment. They partner me with a professional that they've run the program with me. So we do all of the interviewing together. We're able to do screening for any kind of roadblock that might be standing in the way for a student to graduate, et cetera. So we usually get information out there in the world before Christmas, hopefully. January, we start telling people to start getting their applications in, and then we continue to do interviews up until March when we figure out who's going to be in the class.
Awesome. Well, in terms of the BAC apprenticeship, we cast a pretty wide net. I would say that at this point in time, largely the apprenticeship application is open to people who can log on the internet and fill out an application. But I would say our more targeting recruitment, some of the unions actually do go to high school job fairs. Actually, my local here has gone to middle schools, not to recruit people, but to basically, not to recruit 14-year-olds, I'm sorry, but to basically just say this, think about this, this could potentially be a career path, because, you know, most high schools really hammer home on going to college. So it's a way to just say, you know, you're early in your studies, you obviously have a ton of time. Think about, you know, if you like working with your hands, you like working outdoors, you like doing, you know, physical work, this could be something that you could think about when you become a senior. Outside of that, we recruit from trade schools, you know, secondary education, vocational schools, and also, again, workforce development programs like Helmets to Hard Hats, local programs like Power Corps Philadelphia. We're kind of just open. And if you have some experience, of course, that's great, but you don't have to have any experience. And that's what the apprenticeship and pre-job apprenticeship program is for.
So I want to be able to give you guys plenty of time for closing thoughts. So for your last question, I'd like each of you to answer, what is the equity that we are discussing in this panel and on this topic? What is the equity in preservation trades that you want other people to know about? Janae, you can start.
You're just gonna put me on the spot like that. For me, equity has always been being able to put money into a corporation and getting something out of that corporation, whether it be time, whether it be income, whether it be knowledge. I don't know, but that's my definition.
I can go next. So piggybacking on what Shanae is getting at, I definitely feel like in this very specific topic, it's really about access and wage equity. And in preservation, especially through the academic route, I think that we have a lot to work on in terms of wage equity and paying people essentially what they deserve for the work and for the time that they put into their work. And that was something that actually really drew me, because I also, like Neela, was, you know, for a long time worked for a non-union architectural conservation firm that did amazing work. But what actually drew me to the trades, in part, amongst many, many other things, the union trades, is that the union wage does not discriminate, which is really incredible. It kind of blew my mind when I really thought about it, considering, you know, gender pay gap, and many other issues in terms of wage equity, but it's equal pay for equal work. Whoever is physically able to carry out the work as needed gets the same pay, gets the same benefits, gets the same pension, which is rad. So that for me is equity, but also access. It's really important that there isn't a barrier to people who can attain that. It's just about drive, interest, and follow through. So not saying we're perfect over here at the union, but that that ability to access that, as well as wage equity, is I think really radical in the preservation trades.
I think for me right now, equity means equal access or open access to information. I think that the more I can tell someone about the opportunity of getting into the restoration trades and how they could have access to that, not just for the living wage, but also for the humanity in the work. This work is amazing. I don't have a real kind of like, I'm not a religious person, but preservation is my religion. And I want to let more people in on that. And so if I can give someone the information on how to make preservation and restoration part of their life every day in a way that you then can make it your job, which for me is like wild, is really important, because it's having respect and interest in the work that you do every day. And if that means working with your hands and making something beautiful, that's amazing. If that means that you can visit the work that you've done for the rest of your life because you know it's not going anywhere, then that's even better. If you like it, it's even better. If you're good at it, it's great. But I think just for me, equity of information, that this is a path if you want it. And if you have questions, I'll try to, if I don't know it, I'll find someone else who has it. So I think the more people that know that you can work on beautiful things and interesting things, and use the tools that you hoped you would use when you were a kid, you can do that every day if you want to. And I think that giving that information to someone who just didn't know to ask, or it wasn't on the menu of options, is really important. So equity of information, access to information, in the hopes that it then can inspire someone to do something a little bit different, or to do something that they thought maybe wasn't for them.
I think sort of maybe just to summarize, it sounds like there's also equity in having pride in your work. Shanae, the way you were describing like the tactile, how much joy you got from the tactile nature of it, and how you felt so happy that you've been able to touch something and make your mark in history. I think having pride in your work is a huge part of feeling equity as a craftsperson or a tradesman, woman, man. So I think with that summary, I want to thank my panelists. They've put in so much work beforehand to get this going. We want to thank the audience for attending. If you have questions for our panelists, you can also send emails to Preservation Alumni and we'll send them over. Please sign up for our June 5th if you want to go see Neela and get your hands dirty yourself. That's through the link in the chat. And with Casey's lights out, we'll sign off. Thank you all. Bye.